I came here more than 15 years ago, which is crazy to think of it. I couldn't find anyone who'd be crazy enough to join me to start this kind of business. Very hardcore underneath inside. And this is very much like Britain. Whereas Russia is very much like a coconut, very hard on the outside. Almost impossible to break into. But once you're in, it's actually very friendly. I work with a lot of Russians, and I always say to them, if you didn't like London, you just went to a wrong neighborhood. I also know just the dynamics. Probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, Muscovites who would come over to the UK, to London in particular, they'll be looking around thinking, wow, that's amazing, this is gorgeous, this is fantastic. These days, they're a lot more picky. It's a lot harder to make Muscovites fall in love with London straight away. Moscow has made a lot of progress recently, and I think again, a lot of the things that you take for granted in Moscow, they're either more expensive or less affordable in London. Or just trickier to get through to. But yeah, generally I still love London, and this is I always say things have to go terribly wrong for me to move out of London. I'm doing my absolute best. I'm dreading even moving out of zone 2. So yeah, I'm hoping I'm gonna still be here when I'm, I don't know, 64 or whatever.
We're talking about Russian London. What is the most Russian place in the capital of Great Britain?
I think, first of all, Russians don't tend to leave a huge mark on London, in any particular place. We're yet to get the results from the census of this year. And the previous census is 10 years old now, which is a lot of time for anyone. But there's a lot of Russians, but if you look at the data, they're very evenly spread in each postcode. There's just slightly more Russians in Chelsea and Kensington, and but generally it's very even. Generally, there's no areas that have a massive Russian population, a lot of Russian restaurants or Russian shops or anything like that. But I'm always saying Piccadilly is probably one of the streets where you walk down Piccadilly and it's hard not to meet Russians. So you will always bump into someone you know. And it's partly just to do with the way the street is laid out. Everyone is on Piccadilly, it's a major traffic there. In terms of walking, so there's not many streets that are properly parallel to Piccadilly, so a lot of Russians just go through it. But I think, yeah, you have a Russian restaurant there. There used to be a Russian bookshop, so Waterstones had a Russian section, which was one of the centers. It moved, I don't know if you know, but it moved to Foyles now. So it's in Shaftesbury Avenue now. They just moved it to a different shop where they have a massive section for the international literature in general. So, and it sort of made a lot of sense to move. But yeah, I think, and there's a couple of restaurants, but generally I think it's more events that put Russians together. So it would probably be some either concert or, I don't know, what else did put Russians together? Yeah, probably something an exhibition or some sort of artist coming over. Sometimes they had before the pandemic they had lectures. So it would be someone like Tatiana Tolstoy, for example, who would gather big gatherings, or things like the Russian Film Festival. So those type of events. Yeah, but generally there's not that many. And I'm always saying Russians outside of Russia, by default, again, they treat each other I don't want to say again, enemies, but they're not going to be walking around the world saying oh, I'm also Russian. Ah, you speak Russian, that's amazing. Yeah, every time you're abroad and you walk down the street and you speak Russian, the minute you see a Russian face, your voice suddenly goes very quiet, or you keep quiet. You pretend you're not Russian. which is funny. Like, I don't know why, but it was a really good meme. It's imagine like Jurassic Park, the film, where there's like two girls hiding underneath the table, hiding away from like a dinosaur, and one of them is literally like shutting the mouth of the other one, and the other one is like, and it says something like, when you hear Russian speech outside in London, you literally, somehow they don't tend to like speak to one another, they don't tend to like live together, but if you give Russians a reason to be together, they will be together, and then it turns out everyone is really nice here. And then it turns out everyone is super friendly. Most of the time they're really high achievers, ambitious people with really good, interesting projects. So it's really interesting, like whether it's, a tour in London, or I used to do like pub gatherings as well. So I used to like get a lot of Russians into one pub, and like it's amazing like how many good Russians are here.
Yeah. What makes London so special for you?
I think it's a $1 million question, but I think like personal freedom is very important, and I think this is something you value if you grew up in 90s. So 1990s Russia is very different from like the Putin Russia. In 1990s it was complete freedom. There was a lot of chaos, but it was like proper freedom. And I think, again, as someone who has always been in social studies, I grew up in Moscow in 90s with a lot of freedom, and this is something, again, I value here. There's a lot more like personal freedom, so you can be what you want, you can like walk around London wearing a top hat, you can, you can have different socks, wear, red shoes, no one's gonna tell you what you should or should not be doing. So I think personal freedom is one. I think London is a very active and happening place. There are some places where people are a bit too chilled, if you know what I mean, and it tends to be like a better climate and slightly just more comfortable places. Even Moscow, I find Moscow, even though it's a very ambitious, energetic place, I just feel like a lot of people there are nowhere near as ambitious as they could be if they moved to London. And I think London is one of those places of like permanent activities. And I'm always amazed of how even some of the very privileged Russians who have a lot of money, who don't really need to work, they already moved with a lot of money to just enjoy life. A year or two down the line, they suddenly think, you know what, I'm gonna do charity. Or, you know what, I'm just gonna do like maybe a gallery or something. So there's a lot of things are happening in London, and that's what I think this city pushes you to do something, to be constantly doing something. And like, it's really funny, like Russians are not used to the question of what do you do? So when you meet Russian, that's one of the questions I always ask. Like, this is like a part of small talk here. Like, you always meet people, you always ask them what you do. And then the Russians who don't live here, they look at you and like, I work. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, I said I could figure this out, but like, what do you do for work was the question. And I think here, a lot of people define themselves through their work, through what they do. And I think it's really good. And I think it sort of, it fills you with some sense of purpose in life. And I think London is one of the places that pushes people to do something. So, and that's usually a good thing.
What is your favorite place in London?
I'm always saying like, it depends on what your goals are. If this is like in terms of living, I really like Islington, where I live, and if we have to move, it's going to be really sad. Partly because it's like so central, and as someone who grew up in Moscow suburbs, I sort of have to be in the middle of life, so not very far from like central London. In terms of just walking around, I really like the City of London, and I really like Shoreditch and King's Cross probably. So these are like three places where things are happening, people are interesting, lots of interesting restaurants, lots of interesting streets, and yeah, I like places like Shoreditch and King's Cross purely because it's just such a timely thing. You know what I mean? Like 5-10 years down the line, we're probably going to look back and it's going to look ridiculous, and and some new areas will pop up, and those things are going to turn into, you know, the Camden Market of. But at this point, it's really interesting. There's lots of interesting people, lots of things are happening, and it looks very good. So I like those. Yeah.
In the end, let's have a blitz.
Okay.
What is the best film about London?
I like Sherlock actually. Sherlock, the BBC TV series. I like the way they portrayed London, so I think it's really good. Yeah.
I actually was shocked about Sherlock. That is, it was real person. It's in the house. It was not black. It's blue.
So there's an urban legend that there was like a prototype, but really it's a very far-fetched idea. Like there was like a doctor who was like training other doctors, like a mentor to Arthur Conan Doyle. But he wasn't a detective. He was just very good at like spotting people illnesses. So yeah, but there is a sort of a person who inspired Sherlock. Let's just say that.
I guess you talked about books, but what is your favorite book about London?
Oh, I can't remember the name. I can never remember that name. So there's a really good book by, I think he was an Australian guy who lived in London. He just did another book about New York this time, but he lived in London, and it's something like London through the eyes of the people who love it, hate it, talk about it, live in it, something like this. And it's a very colorful cover with like different tube lines. And it's what I love about that book. It's just a collection of short interviews about London and the way different people see things differently. And it's anyone from lawyers who work in London to people who take care of the trees in London to, you know, the rickshaws, like who drive drunken people around. So it's a really good, interesting like collection of different viewpoints.
Russian London. What is the first association with this phrase?
Well, Russian London is hard work, if I'm honest. Like, I think Russians in London are always like sandwiched between two stereotypes. The reality is, absolute majority of Russians are like majority of London. It's middle class, fairly young, doing office work, leading like normal family lives. But the immediate perception is that you're either an oligarch at the top, or you're like low-skilled, sort of, you know, the kind of Daily Mail nightmare. And yeah, in the eyes of the general public, I think Russians are either this or that. But in reality, it's neither, if I'm honest. Like, the reality is it's just normal people you would probably go past and never realize they were Russians. And it's, you know, middle class by definition is a bit of a struggle in the way that, you know, you're in between. You are defined by the fact that you're neither this nor that. But for Russian, it's a double struggle, if you know what I mean, like, because they're constantly trying to prove that, no, we don't have an oil ring in Russia. No, my money are not covered in blood. No, I didn't come here with like gazillions. And no, I don't know, like I didn't vote for Putin or that kind of stuff. So yeah, Russian London is confused identity, that's the... And it's like one thing I just realized as I was talking, like I was watching this documentary the other day. It just came up on YouTube, in one of the algorithms suggested it. And it was a really interesting documentary from probably about 11 or 12 years ago. It was about a Russian like tiger mom, so the kind of mom who has a lot of ambitions for their child. And it was her coming over with her twins to introduce them to the world of the British education system. And they were like super wealthy, very smart, sharp, ambitious parents. But it's amazing like how different the perceptions of Russians were like even several years ago. Like it was nowhere near as ironic, nowhere near as skeptical. Like no one ever like asked her where the money came from. No one ever had any hint of like, okay, well, are you here to hide the money or that kind of stuff? Whereas these days, with all the scandals of recent years, I think, yeah, it's not the best accent to have. It's not like you do get met with a lot of like toxicity. And I think most Russians are still very lucky and privileged in the way their lives in London like turned out, but it's a bit more of an uphill struggle these days compared to even 15 years ago. So I think, yeah, so slightly toxic sandwiched between the two stereotypes, neither of which are true, but like gradually making their mark on London as well. Someone gave me this book the other day, and it's about Russian travelers who came here at the end of the 19th century, and it's their view of London. And I didn't realize that, but in Piccadilly Circus there was a Russian restaurant called Kuropatkin, which was there, I think, like in 1910s. But I couldn't find anything like apart from Russians in a Russian book talking about it. Pre-Tsarist, like Tsarist Russia, really. So I would really like to hope that, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, there will be big projects with big names with Russian owners. Even if it's not going to be very obvious, even if it's not going to be, there's going to be no Russian flag at at the entrance of the restaurant. But I think it would still feel nice to say that, these Russians came over and they did this and that, and London became richer. London became like, I don't want to say spiritually richer, but you know what I mean? Like culturally more diverse, more interesting, more wholesome and diversified, I guess. And I love Russians in London. They have a lot more in common with Russians living in London than Russians living in Russia. You go back to Russia and it's a different country now. Like I've been here for 15 years. It's a very, very different country there now. And London feels like home, and Russians living in London, along obviously with all the Brits and everyone else in London, they feel like your people, your crowd. So I'm always like saying, if I take my own identity, I would identify myself as Londoner, then it would be a Russian, and then it would probably be like international sort of Britain-based Russian, if you know what I mean. But it's London at the very top, and it's like that's what defines me. That's what makes a lot of Russians Londoners as well. So yeah, I would say it would be nice to have lots of good success stories from Russians.
Thank you very much for this interview and that you joined our project and come to tours of Constantine.
Thank you. In Russian, by the way. So
yes, and watch Russian London. See you.
There would have been some heavy rain in the southwest corner.